Hi everyone. So thanks for attending this. I know it's at 5 p.m., but I believe this is the last talk of the day. So today we're going to talk about economies, which is a fairly interesting topic that isn't commonly covered, I think, in these sorts of conferences. And specifically, we're going to talk about inflation and the quest to manage the Sims FreePlay's economy. So if some of you have attended Amanda's talk previously about live service, you'll find that the economy is just one part of live service, but it's a very important part of what makes the game run. So first, a bit about me. So I'm the lead product manager at FireMonkeys. I've been with EA for around 5 years and around 3 years on Sims FreePlay. Previously, I worked in Ubisoft Singapore, and where I started out as an analyst. So my background is both in business and analytics. And in total, I've been in the industry for around 8 years or so. So first, I thought I'll speak a bit about what game product management is, because again, I believe in Melbourne, there are just not that many of us, or just in Australia in general. So I wanted to kind of introduce what game product management actually is. So it is a confluence of business, players, and our customers, as well as development and developers. So it's really about thinking about all these three things together and basically figuring out what should our product strategy be in order for us to successfully run a live service as a business. So a bit of history about it. I mean, I don't think everybody agrees, but I think I think most people agree that game product management as a discipline is a very new discipline in gaming. Fairly similar, I guess, to like UX. There was a period of time where suddenly people realized that, hey, there was a gap. And this came to be in around 2008 with the massive changes in the industry with free-to-play becoming more popular, as well as analytics, the way in which we can now track a lot more data and actually process and gain insights from it has changed rapidly over the last 10 years. So this is where game product management comes in. So the goal of a PM is to drive KPIs, which is your key performance indicators, and we do so through influence because we don't really have any authority. This is true for all product managers in all parts of the tech industry. And we do a lot of it through validated learning, which is the process of building something, measuring it, and then actually learning from it. And our main goal is to actually maximize business potential. So when you think about what a product manager's role is, it's always to do that. How you do that, it's all understanding all the different levels, and then kind of putting together what your strategy is in actually fully maximizing business potential. And the real reason why we do it is so that we can really stay in business, continue building games. What's interesting that it does differ from what design's goal is. So a lot of times we get into situations of what I would call creative conflict with designers, because design's primary goal is really just about building the best game for players. But that being said, I do think that 10 years is a fairly long time for a discipline to be around. Free-to-play has been around for more than that amount of time, so I do believe attitudes are changing, and I think at some point, all disciplines will have a bit of product management in them. So the agenda, first we're going to start in the beginning. I'm going to start with how Sims FreePlay came to be, and then I'm back on two quests. So if you played Sims FreePlay, it actually is full of quests, and it turns out in terms of live service, we have been on multiple quests, especially related to the economy. And then we'll kind of finish off with some high-level things around economy health metrics, strategies, tactics, and things what to avoid. So let's go back in time. So in 2009, as mentioned previously, it was the height of free-to-play social games, particularly on Facebook. You have things like Farmville. You also had the emergence of smartphones and smart devices. So at the confluence of all these things happening, the industry was moving really quickly. People were having to kind of change business models really, really fast. So at that state, a bit about FireMonkeys. So FireMonkeys was actually from Iron Monkey and Firemint together in 2012. But previously, they were indie studios that were building premium mobile titles for multiple years. So this was the background that we had. In 2010, the dev team was still building what we wanted to be the iPad premium version of Sims. So as mentioned previously, industry was changing really quickly. You could see people buying lots of smartphones. You could see free-to-play rising as a business model. So we made the decision to pivot. So no longer were we going to build just an iPad premium title. It would now be cross-platform and on smartphones, and it needs to be free. So this is where our quest begins. So, well, firstly, we have to set up the game. First, we have to understand game economies. Next, we have to actually set it up. And we set up progression that runs alongside it. So a bit about economies, right? What is an economy? So economy in the real world is really is defined as the state of a country or region in terms of the production and consumption of goods and services and the supply of money. So you have all these agents that is part of this economy, and then you can't really control what everyone else is doing, but if you make one change, you'll see that everyone will react to it. In comparison, the game economy is actually a closed economy where you control everything. You control both the production, the consumption, you control the supply of money. So, it's, in itself is quite an interesting problem to solve because you need to kind of balance it in such a way that it makes most sense for the game as in live service and help it run as a business. But, really, why do free-to-play games need economies? Particularly for Sims FreePlay, it's a sandbox game, right? So there needs to be a way for players to kind of buy things. But when we think about economies, one thing benefit that it gives us is that it allows us to manage progression for longevity. So so Amanda's talk covered a couple of things about live service, but the primary challenge in live service is that of resource management. You only have a specific amount, you have a limited amount of time of which you have to use that time to engage your players for another amount of time. Ideally, you can't actually be building something in 6 weeks, launch it, and players consume it in 1 day. Like, that's not a great business model. You will pretty much suffer if you were doing that. So you're not getting the return on your investment, and it just means that your players are not going to stay around if that was the return that you were getting. So the economies allow us to manage that. Really because they allow us to control how long it takes for players to consume the content, based on how long it will take for them to earn it. Like I mentioned previously, you're controlling both the production and the consumption elements. So I look at it as this way: you have development where you have use time, money, and obviously the quality. You kind of decide what you actually produce. At the end, you produce something, whatever that is, your output, features, content, and then it goes into the game where you use the economy to then manage the consumption of it. And then that's what you use to kind of drive your key business KPIs, which are key performance indicators. Which are like your essential ones are installs, retention, and revenue. So another thing about the economy is that it helps players set up goals. So we're a sandbox game. We don't dictate what you have to buy. And the notion of consumption, capitalism, that's just basically all around us. It's very easy for players to understand. So they can go, okay, I want to buy this piece of clothing over this chair, for instance. And it allows them to just very quickly grapple with that. It allows players to exercise choice, which is very important in a sandbox game. In economy, you can just earn currency and you decide how to spend it. And lastly, it allows players to strategize on how to min-max the economy. There are always going to be players, and I mean most gamers, a lot of them, when you get into a game, you want to learn the rule sets and you want to learn how to min-max it. So economy actually allows you to do that because it is a closed system. And lastly, why we need economies is it's really because of monetization. We are a free game. It's essential on free-to-play, I guess, versus premium titles. So the premium titles have economies for different reasons. And what it does, because it is a closed system, it allows us to then offer players a chance to insert currency from outside, which means convert their money into money within our economy. Instead of having to engage, you can just basically decide to spend to get things directly. And this is pretty interesting, but it allows us, because what we're selling in games are all virtual goods. So virtual goods, I mean, have a huge subjective element in them, especially because we're a sandbox game, so it's about desirability and things like that. But with the economy, it allows us to set up costs, which again, pricing is a signifier of value, and by doing so, we can actually give value to virtual goods and allow us to then kind of balance player effort versus the value that we're set up for that particular virtual good. So when I think about economies, I think about them as the engines of any free-to-play game, primarily because they are converting development output into the fuel that drives your KPIs, which are very essential things that you want to hit in order to gain growth, or to even not grow just to sustain yourself and not die effectively. If done well, when your economy is properly managed, you can actually, and you're continuing to feed things, content and features within it, it actually allows you to kind of propel a long-term strategy as well as long-term life service, because you can see it as the more that you add, the further that you will go, provided that your economy is working as you want it to be and it's not, just not really serving its purpose. And by doing so, it allows us to keep running the game and keep giving players more of what they want. So this one I won't go into too much detail, but this is really just a sense of when I talk about KPIs, what I really mean. Some of them should be fairly straightforward, but we talk about installs, we slice it by platform country. Engagement, we always talk about DAU, which is your daily average user. You have retention, and you have engagement metrics like sessions per day, average session length. Monetization, we look at things like revenue conversion, ARPS, which is the average revenue per spender, and the other one's average revenue per user, as well as other metrics like revenue per install and lifetime value. So before I jump into the other bits of the quest, I need to just set some context around what Sims FreePlay is, in case you haven't played it. So for Sims FreePlay, it works where players have a whole bunch of Sims to get the Sims to set up the action for the Sim, which is effectively time, so we call it an appointment. And then once they're done, they can come back and then collect Simoleons, which is our currency, and XP. So then with the Simoleons, what they can do is they can go and buy that stuff. This is the build mode store where you can buy all kinds of furniture and other things. So these are I would say, your smaller purchases. And then you can also go to one level higher, go to town map, and then that's where you can buy things like house lots, community lots. These are big buildings. There's lots of features within that. There's lots of new experiences within them. So we're now going to get into some terminology when it comes to setting up an economy. So first thing you think about is tabs. So tabs are like your production units in economy, which is where players gain currency. So as mentioned previously, they gain currency by setting up appointments, converting time into simoleons. We have a very basic loop. Some games have very complex loops. Ours is just really straightforward, which is get a sim, do an action, and then you can keep getting simoleons. And things are where they spend them. So as mentioned previously, we have small spends and big spends. Some of them are like buying furniture. Some is buying really expensive things like houses or community lots. So when you think about setting our economy, you think about currencies. And there's a few properties and things to note about currencies. So firstly, just talking about what Sims FreePlay has, we have soft currency, which is simoleons. And soft currency is defined as currencies that players can earn without spending real money. So this is normally currencies that you just get through gameplay. And then you have hard currency, which is your premium currency. So we have two, lifestyle points and social points. And this is currently a currency that's mainly attained through spending money, and the purpose of which is to either quick complete, which is to rush times, and also to make premium purchases of things. So we covered the types of currencies. You can, there's clearly quantity because you could have like multiples of currencies, multiple premium currencies. A lot of it would depend on what you want to achieve in the game and what the genre is. Purpose is covered as, we We want a soft currency to basically be this one thing that you can then use to spend on a broad variety of things. That's not necessarily the case in a lot of titles. RPG games normally have very specific currencies for specific things, but Sims FreePlay is a sandbox game, and we felt like that was the simplest way for players to grapple with it. Then you have granularity, which I guess somewhat like means a bit like denomination, where you have to make a decision. Should your currencies be in the tens, in really low numbers, or should they be in the millions? I guess that there are pros and cons for each. If it's really in low numbers, it's easy to grapple with. But at the same time, if it's too low a number, then you don't really have many options when it comes to giving it away to players, because every single unit is worth a lot. So that's when it's worth thinking about. It really is weighing the pros and cons. And then this one's a bit more advanced, but currencies, there's also permanent and also temporary currencies. Our currencies here are permanent, which means that they won't disappear and players can just accrue them. But then if there's temporary, that's normally used in games where you have events, where for purposes of balancing the economy, they just go, okay, this currency is only available for the 14 days that the event is running. And afterwards, they can decide whether to convert that into something else, or you just lose all your currency. So this is what our basic looks like. You have sim action, which is gameplay, and then you collect the reward, and then you spend it, and then you unlock more things to play. So the store allows players to, gives players a chance to basically convert money into currency, which then allows them to get things faster. So it's pretty straightforward. Majority of spend is usually on currencies versus actual content. I see that to be true in most games. And depending on how you set it up, your hard currency or premium currency should normally be the one that generates more sales. Store is pretty important, but that's a whole different topic altogether, because it's important to consider around pricing strategy and having strong UI UX, because again, you're selling virtual currency for which you need to signal to players, help make their decision making easier, because you're selling something that really it's quite hard for people to grapple with what the value is. And for us, we decided to sell all 3 currencies for money. Not all games do this. Quite a few games actually just sell one and then allow you to convert it. But that was a decision that we had made previously. So progression is pretty straightforward. You earn XP, and XP accumulated allows you to gain player levels. At different player levels, you unlock features, like the ones here, and also more options. So it will allow you to unlock more things like objects, mini lots, quests, features, and also we increase your sim count. We increment your sim count as you level up. So you get more and more sims. So, okay, we've covered understanding game economies. We've covered how to set it up, the basics of like your tabs saying store currencies. Covered how to set up the progression using XP. However, there's one thing that we've forgotten to balance the economy. So the question is, what's wrong? The economy isn't balanced. So what exactly have we not done? And I think it's quite, it might seem obvious, but it is actually the fact that as you level up, you get more sims, which equals more tabs. More tabs equals increased earnings. Increased earnings means that wallet balance, which is how much players can hold, actually increases exponentially. And this can cause something like hyperinflation, where players just have a lot more currency than what they can possibly spend on. So this is a problem because remember, the economy is an engine. If your engine is broken, then you're in a lot of trouble, which means that you have a lot of development effort, you shipped out lots of content, players instantly consume it, and then you're back to square one, but more like you're actually several steps back, because at that point, they've already consumed it, they're just going to leave anyway, because they already had gotten what they wanted. So when the economy stops functioning, it really stops functioning as a control and converting mechanism. So the question is, what should we do here, right? So there's 2 options. One, we could continue to scale the sim count, and then we scale the cost alongside it. So remember that your tabs, you're getting more tabs. So when the tabs, you're getting more tabs, we can also scale the sinks alongside it. The other option is you just go, screw it, let's not increment sim count, you just give everybody fixed sim count, everybody just gets 5 sims. And in that way, you just have tune for 5 sims, effectively. So kind of thinking through what that would mean, in the first option, it is going to be messy. You're going to have lots of weird, your spreadsheets are not going to be super clean. There are not many games that do this, and it definitely requires more effort to keep it balanced. And a lot of it might be guesswork. You're not going to get it like super tight. The other one, you get a much tighter economy. It's going to look a lot easier. It's going to be easier to tune. The spreadsheets are going to look clean. But it creates different problems, which is our players going to be happy to have 5 sims. Remember, there was an image that I showed earlier about the sim town. The sim town is actually pretty huge, where you can build like lots of houses and lots of community lots. But imagine a player's only controlling 5, or if it's 10, whatever it is, it's a fixed number, and is that great? So in the end, we decided to go with A, which is to keep the sim count and scale. So we are going to scale the cost as a result. And the real reason is that it's important that the economy serves the purpose of what the aspirational goal of the game is. So the economy is not there to dictate what the game is, but more like economy, you adjust the economy so it suits the game. So in this case, it's key to maintaining strong player goal formation of building up the same town. It's not really a sim town if you only have 5 sims. So basically, we have to deal with we have to just bite the bullet and deal with messy spreadsheets, which is fine. And then what we have to do is then tune costs based on expected earnings as sim count scales. So when it comes to scaling, there's 2 key things that we have to do. So I talk about, I mentioned that we have buildings and houses. Buildings and houses are our biggest ticket items, which means that they're expensive, because it makes sense. You don't buy a building for like 10 simoleons. So here we decided to scale it based on building and house number, which meaning like for every house that you buy, it will get more and more expensive because there's a correlation to the number of houses that you're buying with your player level, and player level correlates to sim count, the amount of sim count you have, on the amount of sims you have. So the reason why we had to do that is because the other way of doing it would be to scale costs based on player level. So as your player level increases, then the cost escalates alongside it. So the main problem with that is that it's just a terrible user experience. So if I go and see this house number 10 that I'm trying to buy, if it was 100,000 and then I leveled up, suddenly that price would change 200,000. That's quite bad for the player because you can't really set goals if the goals keep shifting everywhere, and nobody really likes people changing price tags on them. So that's why we had to go with the solution of the scaling based on numbers so that the price would stay constant at that number. And the other thing that we do, which is again is a very weird thing that Sims FreePlay does, is that so as you level up, you get more taps, so you get more simoleons. So what we had to do is that in the store we also sell simoleons. So what will happen as players level up and get more simoleons is that the packs in the store would become less and less valuable because I now need 1 million simoleons, and 1 million simoleons could now cost $1,000, which is just kind of ridiculous and too astronomical that nobody will buy it. So what our game does is that as you level up, the conversion of simoleons to dollars becomes better for you. So you get more and more simoleons as you level up to ensure that every time you make a purchase, it's still reasonable for you to get what you want, and not just astronomical to the point that nobody is going to spend on anything in the game. So, given that we've done all of that, that's great. We set up everything for the Sims. Then here are some takeaways from this quest. One, we covered the economy basics of why we need it, what it is that goes in economy, and these are basics, and how to set it up. We understand the notion of actually what it takes to actually balance things and why you have to balance it. And we clarify the fact that economies are meant to serve the purpose of the game, not so much to build a perfect economy just because. And economies are the engines of the game because they convert the effort into a return. So we actually shipped it, which is great. And now we fast forward to our 3rd year of live service. So here's where you start seeing the creeping inflation. So the quest 2 is to manage creeping Simoleon inflation. So the first thing we have to do with any problem is to try to understand what causes inflation. A second thing is to understand what actually manages inflation. And then the last one is like figure out actually what to, can we execute a strategy to manage it. So I guess the question firstly is why? Why is there inflation? Firstly, in our game, it's a sandbox. Players choose what to spend on, which means that it's subjective. You don't have to spend on things. So people are not going to keep spending if they don't want to spend. So they can save and it's fine. There is no wallet cap, which means that we're not going, okay, everybody can only hold 10 million simoleons. It's more like, there is no cap, so you can just keep hoarding or keep saving. And that's age. So this is 3 years in. There's more time that players have to accrue. They also learn to generate more currency because, again, there's a lot of min-maxes out there, and it's great. People should learn how to play the game, and they will find the most optimal way of doing it. So they will get better at generating currency, which is good. And also, DAU composition can shift. At the start, you might have a lot of players at the early levels, but then at the mid-cycle of your game, you'll see that kind of shift over time to more of the middle to the late game players. And then, as mentioned previously with the hyperinflation example, inflation will impact your KPIs because it would just mean that your engine is not working. So that's why it's important that we manage it. So what manages inflation are sinks. Well, there's a few ways of doing it, but sinks, there's a few properties of sinks. There's the sink limits, which are whether it's capped or repeatable. Cap really means is that there's a hard line. It's where the content stops. It's where people have bought all your houses. They have bought all the things. There's just literally nothing else to buy. And repeatable is interesting because it means that there is no cap. Like in our game, you can basically endlessly keep buying furniture, provided that, I guess the game still runs if you put all the furniture in there. But it's also important in free-to-play games to make sure that you have a bit of both because people will hit the cap. 100% people will hit the cap. You want an avenue for them to just keep spending repeatedly on something else. And another thing to think about sinks is the range. There's the depth of sinks, which reflects how much can they actually spend in this sink. And the other one is breadth, which is for a particular event, for instance, can they spend simoleons in multiple different ways? That it's normally it can drive things like your conversion and other metrics like that. Another way of understanding sinks is to actually look at a chart like that, which is to figure out, in terms of all the categories. So example categories would be like houses, buildings, build mode, CAS, which is our outfits. Look and actually do a breakdown of your game and actually see how is the spend distributed across your sinks. Because this is important because it will tell you whether what's working, what's not working. But then how you decide what's working and what's not working, it really does come down to your expectations and the properties of those sinks. So just because the sink is not sinking a lot of currency doesn't mean it's not working, because it might be a repeatable sink that of very shallow depth, and then that's fine because that's how you set it up. So it's not going to perform tremendously well, but it's inherently limited in that way. But that might be something that you want players to have, so that's fine. So it's quite important to really understand what it is that you want it to achieve, and then you use that information to formulate some strategy. So we're going to go into some of the options. So we've covered all of this, what causes, what manages, and now we talk about strategy. So this one, again, a couple of options. First one, you could add more sinks. So you saw in that chart previously that you had a couple of sinks in there. You could always just go, hey, I want to just add a new one. Next, you can double down on known sinks. So of that chart, you can go, okay, I just want to work on the middle one. I want to double that. I want that to actually sink more. One of the reasons why there's inflation is because that we don't have a cap wallet. So you could just go, hey, let's just cap the wallets. Another thing to do is to increase costs, where you go, okay, maybe things are not priced as high as they should. So let's just go and increase everything. And then this one is the ultimate one, which you should just go, this currency is not working, just introduce a new one. So the first one, adding new things normally equates to adding more features. Adding new features is very expensive. But potentially there is a greater return because you can always learn from what your previous features have done and then kind of build something better. Next, to double down on things, it's known. It's pretty straightforward. You can try to tweak and optimize. And however, I'm PM, I love optimizing things, but there are obviously going to be limits to how much you can really optimize when the foundations are set up in a certain way. Capping wallets, that definitely solves the problem, but would create retention issues because can you imagine, as a player, I'm still playing Sims FreePlay, waiting for something that appeals to me so I can spend currency. But then now, every time I play, I'm not accruing any more currency because I just artificially capped at some point. So this is a problem, especially in a sandbox game, when you want people to keep playing and not suddenly feel like there's no purpose or reason to be playing. Increased costs, well, you could do that, but the players would definitely notice that you're moving costs around. Especially with I guess a very with our audience that are really keen on what we do. A lot of times things get onto forums and whatnot, so this is a quite dangerous thing to do. Introducing currency, so it works, but again, it depends on the genre of the game. It's a very difficult thing to do. It requires UI and things like that. But primarily, I think my main concern around it is that it requires cognitive effort from players, which is suddenly, I already have three currencies. Now I have to deal with an additional one, which I'm not sure how that works. I have to learn that all over again. So that's, again, another consideration when it comes to like doing things like adding a new currency. So on Sims FreePlay, we normally do A and B. We normally look at adding new things, and we also normally look at doubling down on our known things. So the reason being that creeping inflation is actually quite natural for a long-running live service like Sims FreePlay, and really doesn't warrant any sort of like nuclear bomb solutions unless it really is not creeping inflation but hyperinflation. And quite honestly, we look at it always as a win-win option, which is we know that we have to kind of sort out our economy, we have to manage our economy, but we also know that players are always asking us for things, so we always combine these two things so that when we launch anything, we are able to hit what the players want, but also we're able to meet our business goals. So examples of new things that we've added lots of new event systems, we've added the pregnancy event quite recently. In terms of doubling down, it's just more of the same. Adding more buildings, adding more houses. These are all things that we know work, and it's just about giving players what they want. So we've covered understanding what causes inflation, understanding what manages inflation, and then we covered like the strategy that we've chosen to manage inflation. But granted, we've gone through the multiple options. There's multiple options that you can pick, but you need to pick something that fits the context. So takeaways are inflation occurs particularly naturally in long-running free-to-play games. What's very important is actually to monitor and manage the economy. So two things are quite important. Like, you don't really know there's inflation unless you actually see it somehow. It's not great to assume that it's happening, but you do have to look at data, derive some insight, and decide a course of action. And the reason why we do that is to ensure our return on investment. And then what we found works is that we combine it always with something that we know players already want, so that we can kind of deliver on both fronts, so both players and also what we need to achieve as a business. So we covered just 2 quests. The team has been on many quests in close to 7 years of running live service, and it just really never ends because the economy is really, I would say, is kind of like a living creature. It keeps changing, keeps evolving in ways that you don't really expect, but you always need to keep monitoring it and adjusting. So now I'll just cover a couple of really finer pieces of key frameworks and things that might be useful when it comes to kind of managing economies. So the first would be your economy health metrics. So we talked about KPIs, which are your business metrics, which are the same across all games. Economy metrics are actually also the same, but it depends on your economy, I guess. Some will be more complex than others. So we always, in basics of statistics, look at median, mean. While the balances, we do a lot. We look at how much you're earning, look at how much you're spending. And then we always have to slice the data by player level, payer, non-payer, things like VIP level, which is a VIP system that we have in the game. Because normally when you're a payer, you normally are able to earn a lot more than others. So when it comes to thinking about the strategies and tactics, I think it's quite, I try to frame it as generic as I possibly can. So, so there's two pieces. The one on the left is from the Blue Ocean strategy, the 4 actions framework. It's more of thinking about like what are actions that you can take on things on the right, which are the tactics that you have in the game. So the notion of like creating kind of harks back to, if the sink, out of all the sinks that you have, let's just create a new sink. Let's just add something in there and see how that goes. When it comes to raising, I look at it more as optimizing. Can we grow something that's already existing? And then eliminating is a fairly interesting one, which I don't believe in Sims FreePlay we've done, but in other games I have seen it done, where you actually just remove things from the game. So you could remove things like if you have a tab that's broken, for instance. If there's a way of earning something that is causing inflation, you can consider removing it, although there's dangers with doing that, of course. Players would pretty sure be exploiting that already, and then you remove something that they've been exploiting. It's not great. But I've seen games actually remove currencies, for instance, in the game because either they're not being used or you're just confusing players. And then things like, and then the last one, in terms of the action you can take, is to reduce. Reduce means that you could tune down things. You could give less. You could give less content. You can give less in terms of currencies, or you can reduce the reward. So there's multiple things that you could do in order to kind of rebalance the economy. So whenever you think about the economy, it's not just a single action that you can take. There's actually multiple things you can do, and that's where it's interesting, because when it comes to problem solving, it is never very straightforward. It's never like a one solution. So what to avoid? One, you don't really want an economy that doesn't serve your goals. I've seen games that launch with economies that are way too complex, that really just flies over the head of their players who are like, what is this thing? Because it hits the job. It needs to be something that fits the genre, fits your players. So, and it also needs to fit like what the long-term aspirational goal is for your players. Economy isn't balanced, it's not great. Your engine's broken. Whatever amount of time that you're spending on development is not going to get the return, which is really bad. And this is interesting. I think so this is an economy term when we talk about a loose economy, or in PM terms, if you start low, it's very hard to it's very hard to raise costs, because the anchoring effect happens, which is if players expect this chair to be 1,000, you can't suddenly go, hey, it's now 100,000. So that's problematic in live service, because you might realize that price is wrong, but then how do you back away from that when players are already expecting that? Like, that's a real problem, especially when you have a community and when you have you have set expectations like that. So that's particularly challenging. So that's why we always go, okay, we can start tighter and we can always loosen. And of course, not using data. Without using data, you don't really know what's happening. And you're not slicing your data, and a lot of times you set up your economies based on assumptions, and the first thing you should do whenever you soft launch is check your assumptions. So that's normally what we always do, which is we have assumptions around engagements, assumptions around consumption, and then we go, okay, we expected players to consume the content in 1 month, but they're taking 3 months. Are we happy with that? Maybe not. Let's make it easier. Things like that. We always have to go with your expectations and then check using data and adjust. So final takeaways. So economies are the engines of free-to-play games. I look at them as a conversion mechanism. It's very important. That's where if you do it poorly, and actually we have done it poorly, you can get almost nothing for your development effort, where you just freebies everywhere to players, which is great, but not so great in the long run when you can't sustain your game. And it's built to serve the goals of the game. So it needs to be balanced, and management, again, requires the insights and also taking action. So this is part and parcel of a live service. Not so much of just like ship, but more like let's ship, see how it's going, adjust, then ship more things, and then again adjust. So there's always this whole process that we have to go through in order to ensure that we're building, we're measuring, and then we're learning from that, and then building again. So that's actually very important in live service. And then, well, lastly, because we're such game and we have the benefit of having run such a long running title, the quest really just doesn't end, especially if you're in economy, if you're adding content. Things keep shifting, keeps evolving. Players will accrue more and more currency, and you have to deal with that to continue to get the same ROI. So I think economies are really quite interesting because I'm pretty much biased, I think. But yeah, that's it from me. And now we can go into some questions. I also left some helpful references if you're interested in learning a bit more about product management. Deconstructor of Fun is a really important, very interesting site blog and also podcast. That's about free-to-play, product management, and where the business is going. And then a few other things around like economies in a bit more detail than what I was able to cover. And yeah, hopefully this is helpful and I can open up for any questions. Yes?
You talked about the currency and spending it. I guess the payoff for the players is that they have deciding about the amount of time it will take to do that without spending the money. And figure out where what their tolerance is for the amount of time. And they force people to spend money or have them use time as the alternative.
So a lot of it comes down to we have to assign a value to the piece of content that we're putting forth. And the value can be assigned in multiple ways, both in terms of how much effort it took us to create it and also how desirable we think it actually is to the player. So based on that, you kind of work backwards and go, okay, how much, because we basically have all, we know how much players can earn in a specific amount of time. Then we kind of use that to kind of go, okay, we think that you should take 1 month to achieve this. And at that point, players, as they play it, will kind of decide whether they want to spend that month or they would rather just spend to get it immediately, or they would rather, some people just don't want to engage, but they can engage very slowly. They would go, okay, I'll just spend 3 months doing this thing to get it. So it is not, a lot of it, I would say a lot of it is subjective. A lot of it is also, I guess, you have to deal with the fact that a lot of it has been anchored in the game. Every time you put something in the game, you're anchoring and anchoring and anchoring. So that's where if you're going to build a new game, I think the advice of starting tighter versus loose is important, because there's a lot of things we wish we could have changed in Sims FreePlay, but we can't. So I think that's where you kind of gauge. Another thing that's would be important is really sentiment and how it feels. You have to actually play it and go like, is this really taking too long? Am I just losing interest to the point that I just don't care anymore? So I think it's that. There's a lot of factors that go into pricing. Yeah. Any other questions?
Do you use any kind of modeling tools for any of this?
Yep.
Can I ask what they are?
Excel. Yes, I think most of us, yes, we use Excel. Excel is just extremely powerful. And a lot of times it's all about the inputs and the outputs and assumptions. So like mentioned previously, the previous question, it's time, right? Like currency relates to time in our game. In most games it all does. Free-to-play games are all about engagement expectations, and then building off that you have clear assumptions and then go, okay, how then should I price stuff? So it's all just in Excel. Yep. Any other questions? Yep. If not, yeah, thank you.